وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت وتوكل على العزيز الرحيم الذي يراك حين تقوم وتقلبك في الساجدين إنه هو السميع العليم. الصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء إمام المرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يؤتيك ربك فترضى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum to all and Jummah Mubarak. Sorry to keep you guys waiting. I apologize for that. I want to welcome Amin. First time here in Jummah. It's a pleasure to have you here. And welcome back, Akil, after hiatus. It's declared in the Quran that Allah has sent down the book as an explanation for all things. It says in Surah Nahl that Allah has sent down the book as a clear explanation of all things. And in a certain other part of the Quran, it says that we have sent down the book as a fussilat, tafsilu bi kulli shay. And tafsil basically means an elaboration, or which, if you want a better use of words, is an unraveling of everything. So at first when I began to recite the Quran, I said that's a bit of a stretch. Like, how can it be an unraveling of everything? And as I began to recite the Quran, I realized that embedded in the verses of the Quran, it is like an unraveling, almost like an onion when you peel the layers. And there's a different almost way of interpreting and applying these verses into your life at every moment and at every stage of your life. It takes on a different meaning. وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ كِتَابًا لِتِبْيَانًا بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ. And we have sent down to you, O Muhammad, the book as a clear explanation of all things, a guidance, a mercy, and a glad tidings for the people who have submitted to Allah, the Muslimin. So the multifaceted nature of the Quran is well documented throughout history since it was revealed in the 7th century. We have books that compare the Quran and the Bible, for example. There's a deep discussion about the Bible in the Quran. Then there's Quran in science. And then there's Quran in marriage, Quran in divorce, Quran in inheritance, division of property. It has so many different facets that can be applied to so many different branches of life. And one of the key facets is the ilm al-nafs. Does anybody know what ilm al-nafs here is? Ilm al-nafs, exactly. So if you want to compare this, ilm al-nafs is the knowledge of the nafs, which is the soul and the consciousness inside of us. Assalamu alaikum. In modern day study, it can be known as psychology. And so I always like to think of myself, who is better to teach us about ourselves than the Creator Himself, right? Because He's fashioned us, He's created us, He's blown to us, as it says many times in the Quran, of His Spirit inside of us. So He knows us better than we know ourselves. So we have professors teaching psychology, but the Quran itself is a great teacher of what is going on inside ourselves. It unravels these things, like it says in the Quran. تَفْصِيلُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. So today what I wanted to go over is a tafsir of Surah Ad Duha, because I feel like that's such a great surah to describe in the ilm al-nafs. Certain times that we go through hardships, it's a very consoling surah. And like any surah in the Quran or any passage in the Quran, it's good to get a background as to when did this come down. What was the occasion? What is the context of this surah? What was happening, the stage of the prophethood of Rasulullah during this time. So Surah Ad Duha is a Makkan surah. Two types of surahs in the revelation of the Quran. There's the early Makkan surahs, which are revealed to the Prophet when he's just beginning his prophethood. And then there's the Madani surahs after he's established a state in Medina of the Muslims. So this was one of the earliest surahs that were revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first verses of the Quran that were revealed to Prophet Muhammad, Jeff? Exactly. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. Those were the first verses revealed to him in Jabal an-Nur, in the mountain of light they call. And so he used to go there for meditation, and the angel Jibreel came to him and revealed these verses. And initially the Prophet he had a heavy heart, he was scared, you know. He's like, what is going on? I don't know what's going on. This guy's telling me to read. And I'm telling him I can't read. He said, read. I can't read, until he squeezed the chest of the Prophet and came out the words, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. So he was a little astonished. He went back to his wife. He said, you know, this is the experience that I had. And Khadija alayhi salatu wasalam, Bibi Khadija alayhi salatu wasalam, consoled him. And she said, no, you're a great person. You're a person of moral character, you know. Two of his names that he used to go by before, let's say if the Quran was not revealed to Prophet Muhammad, he would be known for two things. One of them was Amin. And Amin is the trustworthy. And Sadiq, we don't have Sadiq here today, but Sadiq means the truthful one. So Allah entrusted in Prophet Muhammad the message for all times until the end of times, until the day of judgment. Because his heart was so secure, it was so amana. Amin comes from the word secure, firm, that he could take the message, and even if it was a criticism against him, he would not differentiate between the message, and he would consider it a revelation, a wahi, and he would put it in the Quran as a revelation. So going back to the point, the first verses were Surah Al-Alaq. Then came Surah Al-Muzammil and Muddathir. So if you look at Surah Al-Muddathir, it says, Ya ayyuhal muddathir, qum fa'andir. So this is establishing the Prophet's mission right now. Stand up and warn. Qum fa'andir. You know, you who cover yourself in clothes, because you used to wrapped up in turban and clothes, stand up and start warning people. Qum fa'andir. Now what interesting thing that happened after these verses were revealed to the Prophet, Surah Alaq, Surah Muzammil, Surah Muddathir, was that there was a long pause. So historians and hadith are differing between how long the pause was. Some say it was 10 days, some say it was 2 weeks, and some go as far as saying that there was a 3-month pause prior to Surah Duha being revealed. So imagine, put yourself in the Prophet's shoes right now, okay? You're getting messages, and someone has told you to rise up and start warning, go on your mission, and all of a sudden, it stops coming. So what type of thoughts would go through your head, for example? I want to keep this interactive like last week. I think it's really good, because if you guys jump in a bit too, like it really makes it easier for me as well, you know, and it keeps me going. So, Arif, in case... Yeah, exactly. So in case you missed it, we're going over the tafsir of Surah Ad Duha, and we're giving a backdrop as to when this... Sorry? Oh, were you? Are we live on YouTube? Nah, you're pulling my leg. So we're going over the surah of Surah Ad Duha, and how it's a great example of ilmun nafs, and how it's a console from God to us in our day-to-day lives, and especially to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So revelation's coming. People are telling Prophet Muhammad, you're crazy, you're majnoon. What are you talking about? You're telling us to go away from our religion. They were astonished at the verses coming out from his mouth, because he wasn't a poet. You know, he wasn't learned in the books in that way, and all of a sudden he's spitting out these verses and these great rhythmic with flows. And not only that, like we mentioned, it was a deep verses that had different layers to it. So they're already calling him crazy. They're like, what? Something has possessed you, you know? And so sometimes the people that we surround ourselves with, if they tell us things enough, it comes into our conscious thought. Subconsciously goes in, and sometimes we might, yeah, maybe I am crazy, you know? What? And then it stops. So what is he to think? So if you said it best, okay, am I going crazy, you know? There's self-doubt. There's a feeling of abandonment, you know, that, oh, I thought that I was on a mission. My God has abandoned me. Maybe I did something wrong. There's a feeling of guilt, you know, and there's a feeling of anxiety, because what happens is that when something is out of your control, you're depending on the angel Jibreel to come with the message of God, and he stops. It's out of my control. And usually anxiety stems from the fact that we want to have control over everything, but there are certain things that are beyond our control. So maybe the Prophet was feeling sentiments of anxiety. Then there's sadness, depression. So all these terms that are in the modern study of psychology are coming up to us as to what the Prophet may be feeling during this gap of revelation.
But Shubair,
Yes.
isn't it assumed that they already knew that they were going to be a prophet? So then why would they feel all of those things?
Well, if you look at Nabi Musa's story, right? That's a very good question that you've asked. Nabi Musa, when he left Egypt and he went to Midian, he started a family, there was no, if you look at all the stories in the Quran, there is no indication that he knew that he was going to be a prophet until he got called to the fire, the burning tree. And that's when Allah said, I have chosen you as a messenger. And that's how it's happened, except for Nabi Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, where he knew from the moment he was in the womb that he was going to be a prophet. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, by all means, he was an orphan. You know, he didn't have that love, and he didn't know, for all means and purposes, his life was a life of Amin and Sadiq. You know, he was a businessman. He was married to a prominent woman until he got the revelation. That's when his life changed. There was a huge 180. There was something, that divine inspiration that came into him, a wahi. So he was a human. The thing that we have to do is that we have to remember is that the prophets, the imams, they're all people that we have to be able to relate to. So they have to have some sort of humanity in them that we can relate to. So if we think of them as someone that are robotic or angels or something that can't feel what we feel, that's not someone that you can really use as an example, because to use someone as an example, you have to be able to relate to them, right? You have to know that they're human beings just like us. And that's mentioned in the Quran over and over again, even about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we have not sent any prophets before you except that they walked the markets and they ate food. You know, they're human beings just like you and me. So these sentiments that he's feeling, we have to be able to relate to it. And there's a great lesson in it, as I will continue on to explain right now. So feelings of guilt, okay? Feelings of confusion, feelings of abandonment, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, anxiety, sadness, depression, and things that are out of my control. These are all emotions that make people unstable, negative emotions. So the logical question is, why did Allah cause a pause in this revelation? Why was there, let's say, a 3-month pause? Can anyone think of reasons as to why a pause can actually be beneficial? And then I'll get into what duha wal layli idha saja, the first verse of this surah. So sometimes
It would to create, to find out if the prophet was up to it.
100%. So to find out if the faith was there, okay? If the patience was there, conviction was there. Then there's another aspect, not only to find out what is in the prophet or what is in us sometimes, you know, and I'm going to relate this back to us very shortly, but also to kind of know what's best for your creation. Allah knows what's best for us. So sometimes if you look at وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, in one interpretation, duha is so what is the meaning of duha? Duha is the forenoon brightness. Okay, so not fajr, duha, morning brightness, but something that happens between fajr and noon. So here we have noon around 11:30 in the morning, fajr is around 4 a.m. Between those two is, so 8 a.m. when you see the sun, is, it's a very glorious type of light, right? So some interpretations of duha is the light of revelation. What duha? And wal layli idha saja is the stillness of the night, the stillness, the pause in the revelation. And we know that we live in a binary world, that Allah has pairs of everything, like it says in Surah Yasin. And so when we contrast that, it's almost like it's necessary, because if it's always shining, the light of revelation is shining on the Prophet, especially early in his revelation period where his heart wasn't strengthened enough to receive those revelations, you know, it's very heavy. So sometimes a pause is necessary to be able to digest these things, to be able to come to terms with the fact that you are receiving these revelations. You know, so an example is, for example, if we just keep eating all the time but we never give our stomach a rest, what happens? There's a disorder, right? If we keep working but we never find the time to sleep, what happens? You go crazy. Similarly, when you go to the gym and you start lifting weights for the first, let's say if you're just starting, you're going to feel so sore the next day. And what do you need with that? Rest. And now trainers are saying sometimes rest is even more important than going to the gym. So especially when you're first starting something, there needs to be more rest until you can get used to it. Then let's say, using the gym analogy, you can go more frequently. So after this pause, the revelation started coming more frequently. Then if you look at Surah Nur, there was another pause. So this pauses kept on happening. And it was an opportunity for the scoffers, for the mockers, for the disbelievers to attack Rasulullah. No, your Lord has left you. He doesn't care for you. He's abandoned you. To make him feel these inner pains, these negative emotions, And once again, relating that to us, that, we have to be very careful who we surround ourselves with. They have to be able to bring us up, because people's criticisms and people's mocking can really have an effect on our inner state, on our mental state as well. So why did God cause a pause? And this is beautifully explained in Surah Al-Furqan. In Surah Al-Furqan, it's a beautiful surah because it goes over all the attacks of the disbelievers and then it just nullifies it. Like, why isn't there an angel with you that comes to receive revelations? And the Quran says, even if there was an angel, the disbelievers would never believe. They have coverings over their heart. And so they used to ask the Prophet, why hasn't this Quran been sent down in one shot, jumlatan wahida? So Allah responds, and He says, "Ba'adawudu billah." Well, I don't have the Arabic version. I apologize. I read the English version. "Ba'adawudu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim." And those who disbelieve say, why has not the Quran been revealed to him all at once? Thus, that we may strengthen your heart by it, and we have arranged it in arranging. We've made it a piecemeal revelation so that we can strengthen your heart by it. So Akil, going back to your point, you know how you mentioned when I asked what is the reason? That's exactly it. Like, to strengthen the Prophet's heart by the fact that there's pauses. Humans are in haste all the time. We want good things to come all at once. Like, we were playing basketball yesterday. Shane, we were playing on PlayStation. And NBA 2K, yeah, and he was playing FIFA, and I analyzed his style of gameplay. He just wants to get the goal right away. Like, he's just going straight on offense without creating that strategy. He's attacking, but it works for him, in FIFA. He's a great FIFA player. But what God's implying again in psychology, the ilmul nafs, is that human beings want everything to come at once, But He's saying that, no, we're going to make it a piecemeal revelation. We can strengthen your heart thereby. We can make you digest it. We can make you appreciate it. So how can we ever appreciate a car that we drive, if we have never been without a car? So there's that contrast happening, How can we ever appreciate, I'm without my family right now for the first time in 3 years. It's been a week. And, yeah. No, but like these pauses and these absences, they make you appreciate things so much more. They say distance makes the heart grow fonder. So even in a romantic relationship, when that distance comes, you appreciate it so much more. And the Prophet had such an intimate relationship with Allah and Jibreel alayhi salam that when finally Jibreel did come down to reveal Surah Ad Duha, in a hadith it says, I had been so eager for you, what took you so long? And Jibreel responds to him, and I had been even more, you wouldn't believe it, but I had been more eager to come to you, but I do not descend unless by the permission of my Lord. Subhanallah. So there's that intimacy going on there. And so let's go into the first verses of Surah Ad Duha. وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. So I think we kind of covered that, right? That there's that morning brightness, and there's the pause, the stillness of the night. And also there's this aspect of passing of time. وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. What is the passing of time? Night and day, right? The covering of the day with the night. And so so sometimes with pauses there's benefits, appreciation, gratitude, and patience and faith. Increases our patience, increases our faith, and it teaches us that all great things require a journey. For those of us that have businesses here, and for those of us that have accomplished things in life, the initial start of those businesses, it was tough. There was a sort of kind of like preparation for the mission that you were about to go on. And so Allah is preparing Rasulullah for this great mission that He's going to go on. He's going to be the one who's in charge of receiving the message for humanity, for mankind till the day of judgment. So he's strengthening his heart thereby. وَالدُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Look at this consolation. The first verses after 3 months of a pause are مَا وَالدُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ وَمَا قَلَى. What is وَدَّعَكَ and what is قَلَى? So let's look at the definitions of those. So وَدَّعَكَ, usually in Arabic, if you look at it, it's when you close something off. So if there's a grave site and you build a wall around it, no entry, you know. So ma wadda'aka, I have not, you know, we have not. Allah has not closed you off. He's not abandoned you, you know. And it's something you don't want to revisit. Usually in Arabic, when you block something off, you don't want to go back to it, you know. And so God is consoling the Prophet here and saying that no, that's not the case. So don't think that, you know. And to relate it back to us is that sometimes we feel that, you know. I'm going to get into the spiritual connection in a bit, but even in our work, sometimes there's pauses in rizq that come, you know, and sometimes the floodgates open and, you know, we have so much more rizq. And so there's always that thing. And when we go through that pause, مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى, it's for your own good that it's paused for a bit. You know, reflect on that. This is psychology at its greatest. And so, we did not abandon you, we did not close you off. مَا وَدَّعَكَ وَمَا قَلَى. So what is qala? It's stuff that's not useful. Okay, so in Surah Ad, I was just reading this last night. The rainstorms come on a valley, it says, it makes an analogy, and that which is good stays, but the scum and the foam that creates, it vanishes. So truthhood always stays in the world, that which benefits humanity, and that which doesn't benefit humanity and falsehood is bound to perish, is bound to vanish. So qala is something that is not useful anymore, so you toss it away. So God is consoling the Prophet, almost like He knows exactly what's going on in the heart of the Prophet. And this happens multiple times in the Quran where God is consoling the Prophet. It's such a great intimate relationship. And God has left this for humankind that we can also feel that consolation when we recite the Quran. مَا وَدَّعَكَ وَمَا قَلَى. No, you're wrong. مَا وَدَّعَكَ. You know, I'm correcting you. You are wrong. I did not abandon you, nor did I toss you away. You're still very important, you know, and your mission is very important. مَا وَدَّعَكَ وَمَا قَلَى وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. So two interpretations, right? وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ could mean the eventual akhirat after this life. That, you know, the Prophet is promised what? Al-Kawthar. Al-Kawthar, the fountain of paradise from which he will drink and his followers will drink. And inshallah we can be amongst those followers in paradise drinking from the fountain of Kawthar. Then he's promised Maqam al-Mahmuda in Surah Al-Isra. Maqam al-Mahmuda is a praised station, Mahmuda. So these are things that God has promised Rasulullah. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ, the end is better than the beginning. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. It could also mean that his mission, the way it's starting, it was a rough start. And usually when you start a business or start a project, it's a rough start. So God is saying to him that the end of it, we can guarantee you, is going to be better than the beginning. And you will see it. وَلَسَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ فَتَرْضَى. You know, the end will be better than the beginning. And وَلَسَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ فَتَرْضَى. And we will give you so much. I will give you so much that you will be content. فَتَرْضَى. You will be so satisfied. And so the Prophet, imagine, his only goal was to unite the people, his qawm, under the truth of the message. And at the end, before he left the world, he saw that. You know, the fath is the victory, the final conquest. He saw his ummah united, and it gave him so much pleasure. And they were praying, and he was sick, and you know, there's narrations that Jibreel came to get his soul with his permission. Can I take you? And he said, I'm going, like I'm happy. Fatarda, you know. So that's what it could mean too. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى وَلَسَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ فَتَرْضَى. You will be happy. So now what can we take from this, you know? Spiritually, sometimes, you know, our connections waver. You know, there are times when we feel so connected, you know, and we're asking for forgiveness, and there's sometimes tears running down our faces, or there's times when we're lonely and we connect to Allah and we feel it, and there's times when it just stops. And we cannot think that God has left us or that He's abandoned us. He's always there, and He's going to come back, and that surah is for us as much as it is for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Our missions are different, but in the end, the greatest mission is that of seeking nearness to Allah. And with that, there are bumps and bruises, and especially when you start, you need that pause to digest the information, because it's very heavy on the heart. Just like revelation to Rasulullah was very heavy on the heart. So inshallah, there are other instances in the Quran as well where we see that Allah is consoling the Prophet. In Surah Hud at the end, He has relayed so many stories to Rasulullah, and He says, these are the stories that we tell you to strengthen your heart thereby. The same things have happened before you. Come, and there's that intimacy. So inshallah, we can feel that intimacy, and we can feel that God has never forsaken us, and that He has promised us, if we stick to the right path, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. Inshallah, we can be one of the believers. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله والحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. صلي على محمد. There's been a lot of social media buzz over the last week for a prominent figure accepting Islam, and who is that? Andrew Tate. Do you know who Andrew Tate is? Sorry, he's the Imran Khan of the States, right?
No. I thought you were going to say there's a lot of stuff going on about him.
Oh, sorry, man. I'm going to research that for next week for you. Yeah.
Who is Andrew Tate?
So Andrew Tate, he's who is?
Top G.
He is.
He was a comedian, like hardcore.
He's like a
very old
MMA fighter, social media guy.
Yeah.
I saw that, yeah.
Jewish.
Very-
Was he? He was. Yeah, he's Romanian. But Romanian.
No, he's not Jewish.
Yeah, I don't know exactly if he was Jewish or Christian or, but the bottom line is that all praise belongs to God for guiding Andrew Tate to the truth. I mean, what better thing could it be for any of us to go back to Islam without any preconceived notions? In order for him to accept Islam, what did he obviously have to do? Is detach that stigma that's been placed around Islam. And so he went with an open heart and he came to it. Because if we watched his podcast a week ago at Shane's house, me, Jafar, and Shane, and we came to the conclusion that he was very articulate, he was very logical, he knew how to use reason, and it's amazing that he's accepted Islam through that. It's a sign to us. And does it validate Islam for us more? No, because Islam, it doesn't need anybody else to validate. The truth doesn't need anybody else to validate itself. But does it serve as a sign of hope for us? Of course it does. He has a massive platform, What did they say in the podcast? That he's been the most searched human being, even more than Donald Trump, in the last year. Yeah. So I mean, him accepting Islam with that platform, like I know you like Jordan Peterson. And that's why the Muslims love it when people like that come to Islam. It's a very evangelical religion, Muslim. If you read the Quran, it seeks for you to stand up and call people to the truth, just like the Christian religion calls them to the truth. So if you look at Andrew Tate, it's amazing because I remember when I used to play basketball, I used to captain teams and I always used to pick my cousins. And when the trade deadline was approaching, I would be like, okay, you know what? We need this guy because I know that if we get this guy, we're going to win the championship. And so if we would land him, we'd celebrate. We'd be like, amazing. And it would push us, it would raise us to a higher level to compete for that championship. So sometimes when great figures, prominent figures, not great, but prominent figures like this with platform come, it's a time to rejoice and not to slacken, but to get raised up with these people who now have Islam backing them. And sometimes we said Andrew Tate may have been obnoxious. There were certain comments he said which were, They were rough around the edges, and Islam doesn't teach that. But inshallah, now that he's embraced Islam, he can polish up these things and smooth out the edges. And now his communication method will be so much more stronger, and maybe it'll reach hearts in a better way, and he'll be, because that's what Islam is. It teaches you how to do da'wah. It teaches you how to invite people to the truth. And so we're very glad that Andrew Tate has been blessed by God to see the truth and to accept Islam. And we hope that, ourselves included, that we can detach certain stigmas and become reverted almost into Islam. Because just because we're born into the deen doesn't automatically make us practicing Muslims. We have to really rethink about how we approach the deen, just like how Andrew Tate has done. And for him, it was enough. It's a big step. The guy's 38, he's my age. He has so many followers. So many people are going to mock him for doing this. So many people are going to say, you're going crazy. Why are you making... it requires a lot of conviction to be able to accept the deen in that way. And we have to establish that conviction by reverting ourselves to the basics of Islam. What does the Quran say? How should we approach the deen? And so there's many lessons to be learned. There's a moment to rejoice. All praise does indeed belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات اللهم صل